All right, so I think we can start. Good evening, everybody. It's my great pleasure to be today with you here, so many of you, for the inauguration of the INSEAD-Sorbonne Université Distinguished Chair in Behavioral Science. Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Quelques mots en français, même si la présentation aura lieu en anglais, pour vous remercier d'être venus si nombreux à l'inauguration de la chaire en sciences comportementales Sorbonne Université INSEAD. So tonight we have the pleasure of having four distinguished speakers who are here with us tonight. And my role is really to introduce the speakers, so I'll be brief. But also I have another very important role, which is to remind everyone to please turn off the mobile phone. So, yes, Peter, thank you. So our first speaker tonight will be Professor Barthélémy Jobert. We're in his university here. He is a professor of art history, specialist in modern and contemporary art, and he is the past president of Université Paris-Sorbonne, which just merged officially last month with Université Pierre Curie to form the new Sorbonne University. So please join me in welcoming Professor Barthélémy Jobert here to the podium.
Thank you. I will speak in French because I will give you some indications about the place we are. Because je vous accueille donc dans ce grand amphithéâtre et c'est un grand plaisir, un grand honneur pour moi. Je ne sais pas très bien en quelle capacité puisque je ne suis plus président de l'Université Paris-Sorbonne et que tout à l'heure vous allez avoir le président de Sorbonne Université. Je ne suis pas encore le président de la Fondation Sorbonne Université puisque le board qui se réunira dans quelques jours ne m'a pas encore élu comme son président. Donc je vais parler comme professeur d'histoire de l'art car vous êtes ici dans un des grands lieux à la fois de l'université du 19e siècle et avec une symbolique qui correspond tout à fait à ce que nous venons de faire avec l'Université Pierre Curie, c'est-à-dire recréer une université globale de recherche en plein cœur de Paris, dont l'INSEAD est un membre éminent, un membre associé, Sorbonne Université. Le bâtiment où nous sommes, c'est la reconstruction d'une Sorbonne qui avait déjà à ce moment-là plusieurs siècles derrière elle et dont les bâtiments déjà tombaient en ruine. Ils avaient été reconstruits au temps du cardinal de Richelieu, qui a été le refondateur de la Sorbonne, et c'est pour ça que vous avez de chaque côté de la Seine, d'un côté Robert de Sorbonne, qui n'est pas le fondateur de l'Université de Paris, mais le fondateur du collège le plus important de l'Université de Paris, fondé une vingtaine d'années après la fondation de l'université. Et c'est de la fondation de ce collège que nous avons pris notre date de référence, Sorbonne Université, créateur de futur depuis 1257. En réalité, Robert de Sorbonne avait acheté les terrains sur lesquels il a construit son collège en 1253, mais les premiers étudiants sont arrivés, on en est sûr, en 1257. Donc nous avons pris le moment où les étudiants sont là, parce qu'une université n'existe pas sans étudiants, un professeur n'existe pas sans personne pour l'écouter, comme on va on va en avoir la preuve dans un instant. Ici, le cardinal de Richelieu, donc les deux grands personnages qui ont fondé l'université de Paris, ou l'ont refondé et surtout lui ont donné ses murs. Les bâtiments s'écroulaient, donc la République les a reconstruits. Et le bâtiment a été refait en 1889 pour le centenaire de la Révolution. Nous sommes donc dans un lieu éminemment républicain avec les drapeaux tricolores. N'oublions pas qu'on était encore en train de se demander si la France ne devait pas redevenir une monarchie de chaque côté de la Seine, tout en haut. Et puis, un peu partout, des sigles RF, République française, de la même manière que nous sommes ici au cœur d'une institution républicaine d'enseignement. L'université est à la base de tout, et lorsque vous retournerez vers l'extérieur, l'escalier est orné, par exemple, de toutes les armes de toutes les grandes provinces de France, où il y a une académie, et dans la grande salle de réception du rectorat, de la chancellerie, pardon, vous avez au plafond les armes de toutes les villes qui, en 1889, possédaient un lycée, il y en a beaucoup plus aujourd'hui, y compris, nous sommes en 1889, les villes d'Alsace et de Lorraine allemandes à l'époque. Mais néanmoins, cet aspect politique disparaît derrière la symbolique du lieu en tant qu'institution scientifique. Et je voudrais attirer votre attention sur le fait qu'ici, vous avez un équilibre parfait entre les sciences et les lettres. À l'entrée, vous avez pu voir dans le grand vestibule la statue d'Homère d'un côté et d'Archimède de l'autre, qui trouve son écoute dans la cour d'honneur avec les deux grandes figures de la Troisième République, que sont Pasteur et Victor Hugo. Je crois que je n'ai pas besoin de développer. De la même manière que si vous avez au plafond les 5 représentations, les 5 allégories des 5 facultés de l'Université de Paris, vous avez également 4 grands hommes sur le côté qui, chacun d'entre eux, symbolise les grandes disciplines, sauf la théologie, de ces 5 facultés, lettres, sciences, droit, médecine, avec des personnages qui, là encore, s'équilibrent entre sciences et lettres, de la même manière que dans le péristyle, c'est-à-dire en haut de l'escalier, où vous avez un escalier des lettres et un escalier des sciences, pardon, on monte généralement par les sciences, on descend par les lettres, les fresques au mur, qui sont d'ailleurs des scènes complètement imaginaires, représentent des grands scientifiques et des grands littéraires, là encore de manière tout à fait équilibrée, qui symbolisent l'essor des sciences et des lettres à Paris et dans le quartier latin. Et puis, il y a derrière moi cette grande peinture murale de Puvis-de-Chavannes, qui est un des chefs-d'œuvre des années 1880, une allégorie, alors qui malheureusement est cachée pour sa partie centrale par l'écran, dont on m'a dit qu'on ne pouvait pas le relever, donc c'est pour ça qu'on vous projette la partie que vous ne voyez pas, et qui est derrière l'écran. Vous pouvez donc imaginer ce grand panorama, un panorama complètement symbolique, et qui, je crois, est très significatif aujourd'hui, puisque au centre, vous avez une figure allégorique qui représente tout, c'est-à-dire aussi bien la Sorbonne que le savoir, dans un bois sacré, avec, à droite, des allégories des grandes disciplines littéraires, à gauche, des allégories des grandes disciplines scientifiques. Alors, on peut penser que pour Puvis, c'est assez facile de représenter l'archéologie, de représenter la philosophie, de représenter l'histoire, de représenter la littérature. Ça l'est un peu plus difficile de représenter, comme c'est le cas ici, les sciences naturelles, l'histoire naturelle, la géologie, encore que là on a les débris qui existent, mais la physique, la chimie. Et pourtant, je dirais que cela fonctionne. Chacune de ces figures allégoriques est emblématique d'une des grandes disciplines, là encore de manière complètement équilibrée, sciences et lettres. Voilà, vous voyez que vous êtes ici dans un lieu qui est un lieu d'histoire. Il y a une cinquantaine d'années, il se passait ici quelques événements, et à ma place, il y avait Daniel Cohn-Bendit, mais cet endroit, on n'a jamais cessé d'y enseigner toutes les disciplines. Lorsque j'étais moi-même étudiant, des cours avaient lieu dans cet amphithéâtre. C'est un endroit où ont lieu aussi les grandes cérémonies de l'université. C'est un endroit donc extrêmement symbolique qui rassemble et qui manifeste aussi ce qu'est une institution de savoir. Alors ce soir, le savoir qui va nous être dispensé est un savoir neuf. Je ne suis pas sûr, je suis même certain que Puvis-de-Chavannes n'avait pas prévu la discipline nouvelle qui grâce à Sorbonne Université, à l'INSEAD, va se développer tout à l'heure. Néanmoins, je pense que son art est suffisamment éternel, suffisamment symbolique pour que l'on puisse accrocher une des figures à cette science du comportement qui nous rassemble ici ce soir. Est-elle du côté des sciences? Est-elle du côté des lettres? Ça, je ne le sais pas. Et c'est peut-être cela le plus intéressant, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, sciences et lettres sont rassemblées dans un lieu unique, même s'ils sont différenciés de chaque côté de ce bâtiment, parce que le savoir évolue, parce que la science avance, mais il y aura toujours des étudiants, il y aura toujours des professeurs, et c'est cela qui fait l'université. Bienvenue parmi nous.
Thank you, Président Jobert, for this wonderful lesson about this incredible, prestigious location where we are now today. So after the arts, the sciences. Our next speaker is Président Jean Chambaz, who is the president of the new university, Sorbonne Université, who is a professor of cellular biology by training. He was the head of the biochemistry department at the Hôpital Pitié-Salpêtrière, and then the president of the Université Pierre et Marie Curie, before being elected just last month, the new president of the new university, Sorbonne Université. Please join me in welcoming Président Chambaz to the podium.
Good start. So, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to welcome the inauguration of the visiting professor's chair in behavioral sciences of INSEAD and Sorbonne University, which strengthens the links between INSEAD and Sorbonne University we cherish, because that's important to develop that kind of interactions between two world reputation institutions. As it was said, the chair was initiated first through a partnership between Paris-Sorbonne and INSEAD, but with the creation of Sorbonne University on the 1st of January, I'm very proud to say that this academic chair in behavioral sciences has become part of our new university. This is yet another example of the multidisciplinary approach on which Sorbonne University is built, and it highlights the importance of our associated partners to extend our disciplinary perspective even further. Our ability to work across domains and institutions, as well as on a national, European, or international scale, will be essential to our ability to address today's complex questions and to train our students to think in a larger context. At Sorbonne University, we fully intend to continue this development, for example, through our transversal institutes, our participation in European research networks, and through the internationalization of our academic programs. The joint Sorbonne University INSEAD Multidisciplinary Center for Behavioral Studies has a particularly important role, both in its academic research and in its role in bringing prestigious visiting researchers in our teams, such as our first chairholder, Professor Wendy Wood. The Center for Behavioral Studies is a gathering place for researchers to work together across fields of expertise. And these types of initiatives enrich our academic offer, our research possibilities, and our innovation capabilities, both in France and abroad. Professor Wood's area of expertise in behavioral sciences and her inaugural conference on the role of habits in everyone's lives is a perfect example of how behavioral studies can enrich most of research programs. Imagine how a better understanding of the habits of a particular culture or region could enable us to design more successful solutions to adapt to climate change, or to improve prevention strategies that integrate patient and family habits and behavior. Behavioral studies could even be central to one of the major challenges we currently face in universities. As educators and researchers, the use of behavioral patterns connected to social media and directly affecting our society on its development. Digital devices are changing the way students think, learn, and access information to understand the world around them. Our ability to understand students' use of digital devices will enable us to design educational programs that will fully engage our students and will integrate their use of digital technology. So to make change, to answer the demands of the society, we need to understand habits. We need to understand use to adapt our answers, to adapt our solution. It's why this chair is so central to our strategy, and it's why it's so important for us to be here today, to hear to the lecture given by Professor Wood, and to thank all the partners of this initiative who make us more clever and enrich our approach of the problem of the world and of the action of our researchers and professors. Thank you.
Thank you, President Chambaz. Our next speaker is Peter Zemsky. He is the Deputy Dean of INSEAD in charge of innovation. At INSEAD, he's had pretty much all the deanship positions at one point or another. And because, of course, he's a business school professor, he will have PowerPoint slides to show. So please join me in welcoming Peter.
Thank you, Pierre. Jean, thank you for the very kind words. It's a pleasure to be here in your fine facilities. Since we are here in Sorbonne, I thought I would take a few minutes and talk about INSEAD. And as I had the pleasure of being in Davos last week and hearing President Macron say that France is back, I must say in a convincing way, talking about how France is embracing innovation and disruption, which is good for me to hear. I will, as I talk about INSEAD, link it to our French roots. So INSEAD is founded just down the road in Fontainebleau as an innovative play in business school. So the original international business school, the first one-year MBA program. And out of that, we've developed this really leading position in international business schools. As that original niche of being international gets imitated, as often happens in business, we sought to drive innovation, raise the bar. Today, 40% of our activities happen in our Asian campus. Back in the 70s and 80s, we innovated and were a leader in executive education. And I think when you think about INSEAD today as really recognized as one of the top business schools, it's the ability to get the balance right between, on the one hand, relevant programs, great participants, and really high-quality academics. And I think when we think about collaborating in Paris and Sorbonne, it's really helping to get that balance right between deep scientific thinking and impactful programs. But of course, if I think about, and I was going to be honest about the success of INSEAD, it's not just about the strategy, about the innovation. It's also about the values. It was interesting at Davos, we also heard from President Trump. And of course, the contrast is striking today. It's really a gift, I think, to Europe in some ways, what the Trump administration is doing, which is leaving some of the fundamental Western values for Europe to claim. And I'd certainly say that that's a big part of INSEAD's success. INSEAD's always been deeply value-driven, deeply caring about diversity, but also about the role of business in society, and which is, of course, a huge issue today. I think part of that, if you think about the role of organizations, especially multinational organizations in society today, it's incredibly important that we engage nationally. And so I think one of the great things for us in the last 5 years has been the ability to collaborate with our colleagues in Paris, strengthening ourselves and hopefully strengthening the academic ecosystem around us. I just would have to recognize my colleague Hubert Gatignon, who has led this initiative from the INSEAD side and really helped us build bridges to our colleagues here. Some of you I know saw the Behavioural Lab before, but I just want to emphasize one of many pieces of this collaboration, which is the Business Foundations program. Sorbonne has amazing master's and PhD students, some of whom, despite their studies in the arts or in sciences, get curious about business, and we're proud to be able to offer them a certificate program where they find out about this and potentially transition into business and startup careers. So that's a great program that has really been a great fruit of this collaboration. And finally, if I could just, I think maybe the last piece to emphasize from INSEAD is, although the original diversity we set out to tackle was cultural and national, today we're committed to building bridges across all kinds of diversity, so obviously interdisciplinary across, but also one of the pressing social issues around gender. As it happens, in this year when I think gender issues are on many, many people's mind, it happens to be the 50th anniversary of the first 2 women entering the INSEAD MBA program. So we've really taken that opportunity to celebrate a lot of the role models in business, in our alumni, but just around the world, who point the way to a sort of gender parity set of organizations. And in that sense, it's great to be able to offer you this evening some time with Wendy Wood, who's really just a tremendous figure in academia and is just one of those role models I think we can all look up to. So thank you very much for coming out, and it's a real pleasure on behalf of INSEAD to say how proud we are to be part of this collaboration and this wonderful new initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I also want to re-emphasize really the role that our colleague, Professor Pierre Chandon, has been playing in strengthening the ties between INSEAD and Sorbonne. So I'm the last speaker before the real speaker, Wendy Wood. So you might ask, what is he doing here? So I want to be brief and tell you why it is that we're having this chair in behavioral sciences. And first of all, what are behavioral sciences? As we heard from Professor Jobert, we all know about social sciences, so what's the difference? Well, there's a lot of overlap, okay? But clearly, the difference might be that behavioral sciences really focus on the human behavior, everything from attention, perception, decision-making, emotions, and actual behavior. Whereas other social sciences like history or sociology or political sciences, we tend to focus more on the context rather than the individual. The second big difference is that in behavioral science, we embrace the experimental method. As you will see from Professor Wood's example, pretty much all of our studies are a randomized controlled trial where we have a group that we manipulate, we change their incentives, we change the context, and then we have a control group that serves as a comparison. And then this way we're able to make causal inferences. So that's really this focus on experimental method that other social sciences cannot obviously use. You can't just put people in a different society like that. But finally then, perhaps the most important aspect is that in behavioral science, we love to study humans as they behave, not as they should behave. And I think this is perhaps the strongest contribution that we've made to other disciplines, is instead of telling how people are supposed to behave, we love to study all the mistakes and all the errors and all the biases that we as humans are prone to do. So to show you an example of why we chose with Sorbonne Université to focus on behavioral science, I will take an example which is close to my area of interest, which is health and especially food and eating. I'm half French, half Italian, so what do you expect? But really in food, for example, an important question is, should we allow companies to put a health claim on the products? Here's, for example, one health claim which is authorized by the EU. Phosphorus contributes to energy metabolism. To decide whether or not this claim should be on the package, first of all, we have to ask, is it biologically true? We can ask Professor Jean Chambaz, whether it is true that phosphorus contributes to the functioning of cell membranes. But is this enough? Obviously not. We need to wonder, how will people understand this language? And for example, energy, if people think it means the food is energizing, it will help me wake up in the morning, there's a big problem here, because it's not at all what it means. So we have to move from whether something is true at the biological level to wondering how it is perceived and also how it will influence people's behavior. Some of the research we've done here in the lab that Peter Zemsky was mentioning, some of my own research, has been to look at what happens if you tell people that their food has been improved. So for example, we found that if people know that their favorite chocolate candies are now low in fat, they increase their consumption by 46%. Which is maybe not so great from a health point of view. So really, the whole idea of behavioral sciences is to go beyond whether something is scientifically true as understood, to think about how it is perceived and what impact it will have. The good news is that we live today in a world where behavioral sciences are more and more recognized and are having an impact beyond the original discipline. And perhaps the best way to illustrate this is with this photo. Here's a quiz for you. Who are these two gentlemen, and what do they have in common? Yes, 1 point here. So the gentleman on the left, the one who is barefoot, is Daniel Kahneman. And the gentleman on the right, the one who has sandals, is Dick Thaler. And what do they have in common? They both hold a Nobel Prize in economics. But more importantly, they hold it because they've been able to integrate insights from behavioral sciences into economics. The first one, and that's the most surprising one in a way, is Daniel Kahneman, because he's not even an economist, he's a psychologist. A psychologist who actually grew up in Paris. Not many people know this. And he studied human biases in decisions, in perception. And in his famous book, which I recommend to everyone, Thinking Fast and Slow, he reminds us through countless examples that the rational, deliberative system that economic theories assumes we have only explains a tiny fraction of most decisions. As we will see with Professor Wood's talk, most of our decisions follow this intuitive, fast, unconscious system one, where we cannot really talk about decisions. The second, of course, protagonist, Dick Thaler here, won the Nobel Prize in economics just last year. He is an economist, but a self-described maverick economist who was always interested in the factors that should not have an impact according to economic theory. And he's famous for this book, Nudge, showing how small changes to the environment, to the way choices are presented. For example, if you put a choice as a default option, has actually really strong long-term consequences on important decisions like organ donation or enrollment in a pension scheme. And we've been studying, us in marketing and in psychology, all of the ways in which the environment, the context, actually changes our behavior, and how we can use these changes to nudge people towards the right direction. Not prevent them from misbehaving, but making the healthy choice, for example, the easy choice. So we really are today in a wonderful time for behavioral sciences, and that's what we're trying to do modestly in the lab, the INSEAD-Sorbonne University lab, just across the corner. We've been open since 2002. Since 2002, more than 100,000 people have participated in studies in the lab. 110 professors, 75 PhD students, 138 publications. For those of you who are not academics, 138 publications is a big deal, because it is actually almost as many publications as Professor Wood alone. It is a really big deal. And what do we do at the lab? All sorts of studies. Obviously, starting from a business school, we study consumer behavior, we study the behavior of people in organizations, but now we actually have as many people from the rest of Sorbonne University doing work there, studying, for example, basic emotions, studying human-machine interactions, things like that. And how do we do it? We have, of course, typical questionnaires, in group or alone, but thanks to the help of Sorbonne University, we've been able to buy some really cool new tools which allow us to go beyond questioning people. If I'm asking you, why did you do something? How happy are you right now? Well, chances are you don't really know, or maybe you don't want to tell me. So what we do now is have all of these techniques that look at how you behave to know what you really think and feel. For example, we have those face readers. It's very simple. It's using the webcam on any computer, mapping the muscles of the face, and looking at how you smile, your eyes, etc., to know how happy or sad or disgusted you are. Here's a quick, very quick example. Happy? Sad? Angry? Surprise. So this is obviously a bit exaggerated, but it's amazing how subtle changes in our face actually betrays our emotions. And I've kept the best for the last. It's total science fiction. We have now, thanks to the help of Sorbonne Université, invested in a motion capture system. The same system that companies like Disney use for animations. You put some sensors on objects, and then we have these 3D cameras that measure very precisely how people move, how objects move. And so, for example, we can see here even dancers we can reproduce their behavior. So you see the reality and the image here on the computer based on these movements. And this, for example, we don't use it to study dancing, although we could, because the arts are important. But we study this to look at power and body language in negotiations, for example. All right, what we do at INSEAD is we don't just do research for our own sake. We try to make sure everyone can read about it. And so I just want to draw your attention to a fantastic, really, resource called Insead Knowledge. You can Google it. It's also on the phone or on Android. And this is where we actually have journalists who write in plain English what it is that we researchers do, and we answer the question that every student always asks, which is, what is it that these professors do when they're not teaching? And so you had here in the entrance example, including some of the research from Professor Wendy Wood, but it's not just behavioral science. We have leadership and talking about careers, etc., etc. So this is the end of the introduction. Now it is my great, great pleasure, and I must say really this from the bottom of my heart. We've been working on this for more than a year to introduce the keynote speaker of tonight, Wendy Wood. Wendy Wood is a psychologist by training. She studied at the University of Illinois and the University of Massachusetts. She was a first professor at the University of Texas A&M, moved to Duke University, and since 2009, she's at the University of Southern California in sunny Los Angeles. And yet she agreed to come here to see us in Paris. And what is remarkable about her is many things. Not just that she's the world expert on habits and gender, but she has done so many wonderful things, being the president of the Society for Personality, being an editor of many journals, and so on and so on. But I don't want to make you wait longer, so please join me in welcoming warmly Professor Wood here to the podium.
It's a real honor to be here tonight and to be able to welcome all of you to this amazing room and to be recognized for this extremely important position that's linking two renowned universities and providing a means for new, novel, interdisciplinary research. It's a great opportunity for me. I get to hang out with world-class scholars for the next 7 months and amazing students at both the Sorbonne and the INSEAD. I get to eat cheese. I get to drink some wine. And less positive perhaps for you guys, je peux pratiquer mon français terrible. Thank you, that was kind. I've been studying habits, as Pierre said, for the last 3 decades, trying to understand exactly what they are. And tonight I'm going to share that information with you. I'm going to provide you with the latest insights on what habits are and how to change them. And this is useful knowledge for all of us as individual people, but also in our careers and our professions. It's useful to understand people's habits. We all know that we have habits, right? You try to change your behavior, and then you end up falling back into doing what you did before, and you're not exactly sure why a lot of the time. And this is characteristic of habits. Habits are somewhat of an enigma. So we know when we're making decisions, right? We make decisions clearly. We know when we're having feelings, but we don't know always when we're acting on habit. Habits are, in a way, invisible to us. They're invisible even to the person who's acting, but they have profound effects on our behavior. One of the tricks to understanding habits that you'll see is that mostly you won't recognize when you are acting on habit. And I'll illustrate that throughout the talk. I will give you 3 keys, though, to understanding what your habits are, 3 insights. And at the end of the talk, there will be a short test to see if you learn them. Not really, but maybe. So look out for the keys, pay attention, and see what you learn. So you may have had the experience, you can type on a keyboard fluidly without even thinking about what you're doing. But if I asked you to list the keys on the 2nd row of the keyboard, you might not be able to do it. I can't. This is an example of a disconnect between our behavior and what we know, what we do and what we think. And this is typical of habits. If you've ever tried to describe to a child how to tie a shoelace, you know it's just much easier to show them. It's easier to do it. That feels fluid. Explaining gets clunky. Because again, there's a disconnect between what we know about what we're doing and what we're actually doing. You might also have a habit to drive your car, and I bet you do the same thing when you get in the car every time. Put your seatbelt on, look in the rearview mirror, put your key down or put it in the ignition, maybe put your foot on the brake. You do it without thinking, but if I asked you, what are you doing when you get in the car each time? You'd have to think and puzzle about it and maybe not even be exactly sure that what you're telling me is correct. This is characteristic, this is distinctive of habits. This separation between knowing and doing. And it arises because of the way our brains are organized. The human brain didn't evolve all in one piece, but instead it developed over time, with each system building on other systems and functions. And the systems talk to each other, fortunately, but each also functions somewhat separately. And habits are part of a system that's called the basal ganglia and the striatum. And you can see it's embedded way within our neural networks. We can see the basal ganglia at work when we put people in scanners, fMRI scanners, and have them do habit tasks. This is the part of the brain that lights up, that is activated when people are acting on habit. When people are making decisions, doing thoughtful things, other parts of the brain light up. And that's one of the ways we know that habits are a relatively separate system from thought and from consciousness. When I started this research area many years ago, one of the first questions we tried to figure out is, well, are habits just sort of trivial things like typing? Or are they part of our lives more generally? And to answer this question, what we did is we had people wear watches. And the watches beeped once an hour. And when the watches beeped, people had to report what they were thinking and what they were doing, and also how often they had done that thing in the past. And what we found is that about 43% of what all of us do every day, we are repeating on a regular basis in the same context. This is a huge amount of repetition, much more so than most of us realize. And the reason we don't realize it is because when people are acting this way, in this highly repetitive way, they're not thinking about what they're doing. So 43% of what we do every day, we repeat in the same context without thinking much about it. And there's a wide range of behaviors that we found that people do like this. So, grooming activities in the morning, okay, that probably doesn't surprise anyone. Going to sleep at night, waking up in the morning, these are all habits, repeated activities. Using the internet, transit, biking, walking, getting places, working on the job. Employers don't want to hear this. 43% people are working, repeating what they've done before and not thinking a whole lot about what they're doing. It's automatic. They're acting habitually. The same thing is true for studying, eating, and even socializing. Now, a lot of what we do during the day is also very thoughtful. That leaves 57% where we're actually making decisions. So you might be deciding, what restaurant am I going to go to tonight? And you're making a conscious, thoughtful decision. That's not acting on habit. That's something very different. Or you might be trying to figure out how to explain to someone something that will be difficult for them to hear. That's also a very conscious decision, and that's not a habit. But 43% of our behavior is habitual, and we're doing it without thinking. And the failure to recognize this has led to some of the biggest mistakes in public health campaigns. So let me give you an example. Fruit and vegetables. How much are we supposed to consume? Well, according to, can people hear this? Yes, no? Now you can? No. Okay, I'm staying back here. Okay, so 5 a day for better health. According to researchers in the early 90s, people were not eating enough fruits and vegetables. This project started in California, was picked up by the National Cancer Institute, and then the World Health Organization. And the argument is we should be eating more. The World Health Organization says we should be eating 400 grams of fruit and vegetables every day, which is about 5 servings. It's just the same message. And when this program started in the US in the 1990s, it consisted of ads, lots of media advertising, stickers on fruits and vegetables. Does this work? Ah, yes, okay. And supermarket programs. And it was tremendously successful in one way. It changed what we know we should do. So when the program started, only 8% of the US population knew that they should eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. That's hard to believe, really, given how much advertising we've had on this since then, but only 8%. 4 years later, after the program had been in place for 4 years, over 1/3 of people understood. And that's amazingly successful for any program, right? Change people's beliefs? Sounds like a model program. Except it was really designed to change people's behavior. And only 11% of people in the US were eating 5 servings of fruits and vegetables at the beginning of the program. And then about 10 years later, 11%. So it was not having any effect on people's behavior. And the Center for Disease Control figured this out, and they decided that they had to change something. So they thought, well, maybe it's the limit, right? Let's tell people eat as much as you can. It doesn't have to be just 5 servings. Fruit and veggies more matters. And they started a new program in 2009, and since then, consumption has decreased further. Why is this? Well, they didn't take into account that what we eat is very habitual. They thought that we are acting on our knowledge, what we know we should do, and if we were all rational, sure, that's what we'd be doing. But we're not. Eating is habitual. We tend to buy the same sorts of things in the grocery store each week. We tend to eat at the same times of day. We tend to eat the same sorts of things at each meal. Now, sometimes we eat novel, different things, but 43% is repeated. And it's very hard to change something that is that habitual. So how do we start forming habits? What happens? Well, when I moved to Southern California, I didn't drive much at all. I was a pretty scared driver. And actually the first few days that I went to my job, I talked my lovely husband into driving me, but he wasn't willing to do that for the rest of the time I was there. So I had to figure it out. And I was stressed, and I spent a lot of time working through maps and figuring out routes and how long it would take and what the traffic would be like. And I learned very quickly that traffic is always horrible. It doesn't matter what you plan. But I was planning how to get there. After about 3 months, it was a very different experience. After about 3 months, I had a habit. I'd get up in the morning, I'd take a shower, I'd check the time, I'd have some coffee, I'd get in my car, and I'd do just what I'd always done before. And it was not stressful. In fact, I didn't even think about it. I just did it. It took me many months, really. I mean, 3 months is not a short amount of time, many months of struggling with this for a bit before it became a habit. But with the repetition, that became automatic. And cognitively, at a cognitive level, this is what we mean by a habit. So if you have a habit to run first thing in the morning when you get up, if you're a jogger, good for you. When you wake up and you see the time, the first thing that's going to come to mind is, put on my running shoes. Now, we're not automatons. You don't have to do that. You can always decide, no, today I'm going to do something different. But most of the time, it's easier to just do whatever is in mind. We know what's going to happen then. It's easy. We know how to do it. Most of us are pretty simple and just carry out what's in mind. This is true, we have found, for effortful behaviors like running. It's also true for other behaviors like riding a bike. If you have a habit to use your bike as transit, then you will get up and you'll get on your bike and you won't spend a lot of time fussing, well, what's the weather going to be like today? Well, maybe I should take the car. Am I going to stop by a grocery store, have a package to carry? You just get on your bike and go. And that's the nature of habit, is we tend to just repeat what we've done in the past. And there's a logic to this. We have habits because they work for us, right? It's like that old adage, if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll keep getting what you're getting, but in a good way. Because if you keep performing the same behavior in a particular context, you'll get the same reward. I got to work. And that's the logic of habits. Habits are a sort of a shortcut. They're a shortcut that we use to reduce our need to make decisions. They make us very efficient. They're not always accurate. They're not always the right decision, but most of the time they are, because they form through repetition. You have to repeatedly get that reward in order for habits to form. So how can you use rewards to actually get people to repeat behavior? There's a wonderful experiment that was done to encourage people not to take the escalator, but to use the stairs in the metro. And I thought you would be interested in seeing how rewards work. See, the metro starts off with everyone on the escalator. Makes sense. That's what usually happens. But they altered the stairs. So rewards get us to do things we wouldn't otherwise do. But they do something else that's really useful for habit formation. Oops, and I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. Let me first tell you that when a behavior is rewarded, the first thing that happens is you repeat the behavior again. Rewards get us. They're the reason why we repeat behavior. And this is January. It's the month of New Year's resolutions. About 40% of us make New Year's resolutions each year, yeah? Few people did. Notoriously bad, we are notoriously bad at keeping those resolutions. We make New Year's resolutions for things that are very difficult, that we're not finding easy to change our behavior. So the number one New Year's resolution is health, right? Number one New Year's resolution is health, diet. I'm going to get a healthier diet. I'm going to start exercising, get fit. The second most popular is finances. I'm going to, particularly after the holidays, I'm going to stop spending so much and start saving more. Well, a study asked participants to take their New Year's resolutions and to rate how useful they are, useful and life-changing. And they also rated how fun New Year's resolutions would be, if New Year's resolutions can be fun, how fun and rewarding they would be. And participants predicted, as you'd expect, that the resolutions that were life-changing are the ones that they would stick with. Right? So the things that really matter are the things that we expect we will stick with, will persist. But when contacted 3 months later, it was the ones that were fun, that people were still doing. So how do you make dieting and exercise fun? Well, these people were doing things like buying very small portions of wonderful food and savoring it, which is some of Pierre's research. They were also listening to trashy novels or other things while they were working out that they would never normally let themselves listen to. Or to save money, they might decide to cook at home with a friend and make it fun instead of going out for fancy meals. Or find some trendy thrift shop in order to buy new clothes that weren't so expensive. All of these are more fun, and we stick with what is fun. We form habits around behavior that is rewarding. The reason has to do with our brains again, and the way our brains respond to rewards. So when you get a reward, especially a reward that's bigger than what you normally get, your brain responds with a neurotransmitter called dopamine. And what dopamine does is it connects what is in memory at that time. It works for only about a minute, and that's important to remember, that the dopamine from a reward works for a minute to tie together contexts and responses. And as you repeat over and over again a response in a given context and get a reward, you're forming tighter and tighter connections in your mind between that context and that response. And that's what makes habits so hard to change. Is rewards, getting a past reward, has tied together these ideas in your head so that when you perceive a particular context, the response automatically jumps to mind. That's how we form good habits. But it's also how we form bad habits. Because some of the things that are rewarding to us are not particularly healthy or good for us. And so bad habits can form in just the same way. A trick, though, these are our bad habits. A trick, though, is that once that knot has formed in our heads, once that connection has been made between context and response, so we have a really strong habit, it doesn't much matter if we learn something new. The response still comes to mind. It doesn't much matter if the reward isn't there this time. The response still comes to mind. And I illustrated this in some research with David Neal, who is here in the audience. He's a longtime collaborator. We decamped to the local movie cinema, and we gave people bags of popcorn to eat. Now, unbeknownst to them, some got stale popcorn, and it was very stale. It had been sitting in our lab room for a week in a plastic bag. So you can imagine what it tasted like. Others got fresh popcorn that had just been popped. We had them rate. We had the people in the cinema who got the popcorn, we had them rate how much they liked the popcorn. And they rated it on a 7-point scale, 1 to 7. Where 1 is really dislike, it's nasty. 7 is delicious, tastes great. As you can see, no one liked any of the popcorn all that much. But they really hated the stale popcorn. They disliked it, and they told us they disliked it. We had them rate a bunch of movie trailers, and then we collected the bags of popcorn to see how much they actually ate. And this is the percentage of the bags that they actually ate while they were watching the movie trailers. And here again, you can see the first bar is stale popcorn, second bar is fresh popcorn. They're acting pretty rationally. They're eating more of the fresh popcorn than the stale. And that's what you'd expect. They hate the stale popcorn. But this is only people who said that they don't often eat popcorn in the movie theater. These are the people who don't have habits to eat popcorn in the cinema. When we looked at how much people ate who had habits to eat popcorn in the cinema, you can see that they were chowing down, and it didn't matter whether popcorn was stale or fresh, they ate the same amount. So they're telling us they don't like it, but they're eating it. Because they're in the movie cinema, they have a habit, it's being cued, it's coming to mind, right, automatically, and it's just easier to act on the habit in mind. Okay, so what this demonstrates is that once habits form, getting a reward, what you know, what you think, your decisions, aren't all that important in whether you perform the behavior. there's again a disconnect between what we're doing and what we're thinking. We tend to act on habit while thinking about other things, and certainly not about the taste of the popcorn for these habitual popcorn eaters. This is all part of the separate neural system associated with habit, that our habits are guiding our behavior, but not necessarily in a way that's closely tied to conscious thought. So you might wonder, okay, so contexts get tied to responses, rewards are important in making that connection. So how do you control habits once they've formed? And we know this. We've seen this in our lifetime happening. It is one of the big success stories in public health, and that is stopping smoking. We have cut the prevalence of smoking at least in half across the developed world in the last 50 years. And this is a graph that shows all the ways the US government tried to control smoking. You can see we learned early on in the 1950s that smoking was bad for us, but that didn't have much effect. It took adding taxes, it took bans on smoking in public places, it took removing point-of-purchase advertising. What is that? That is, you walk into a store and there are big signs saying buy cigarettes. You have to remember what brand you smoke. You have to ask someone for a package of cigarettes. There's not ads cueing you, reminding you that that was one of the things you were going to buy. And all of these add friction to smoking. They change the context so that it's more difficult to smoke. And they controlled smoking in our lifetime, which is pretty cool. So we do know how to control habits. That's controlling the environment. That's adding friction. And friction in physics means a force that opposes motion, that stops motion. We all learned this in our science classes in grade school. Kurt Lewin was a famous psychologist who believed that human behavior could be described by physical forces. And in order to change behavior, you either have to change the forces that are driving you forward, or you have to change the ones that are restraining you. And tobacco control is a great example of changing external restraining forces, increasing them so that smokers had a difficult time smoking. They couldn't afford it anymore. They had to go outside in order to smoke. They didn't remember to purchase cigarettes when they were at the store. All of those things got in the way of people smoking. But maybe this is a one-off thing, you might think. How general is this friction idea? Well, there's some evidence that it works also in exercise, in getting us to the gym. If I asked you, what gets people to work out? You'd probably say something to do with their willpower, their motivation, right? We see people in the gym lifting weights and we think, oh, great, they have super willpower. But we now have ways of studying their behavior that are separate from studying what people say and what people believe. And that is, we carry cell phones. And your cell phone is being tracked all the time. You probably know this unless you've turned it off. And those data go somewhere. Some enterprising researchers looked at how far people travel when they go to a gym. And they're really looking at cell phones, right? How far cell phones travel when they go to a gym. Across 2 months last year. And what they found was very interesting. So if your trip to a gym, and all the gyms were geocoded, so they knew where the buildings that were gyms were, and these were all gyms that people had to sign up to. They were membership gyms. If you travel about 6 kilometers to your gym, you're likely on average to go 5 or more times a month. If you travel around 8 kilometers, you go once a month. I think those data are amazing because it suggests that there's about a 2-kilometer difference between having an exercise habit and not. That's friction. If it's harder to get to your gym, you're just less likely to go. And we're exposed to low friction environments all the time. Marketers understand this phenomenon well. Would you like fries with that is probably the biggest friction reducer around, at least at fast food restaurants. But Netflix has also figured out how to reduce friction. Through its autoplay mechanism. You can turn it off, by the way. But it encourages you to keep watching and to form a habit to keep watching for long periods because you don't have to make any decisions. You just turn it on and it just keeps going. Another way in which marketers reduce friction, have reduced friction, at least in the US, is to increase the size of food portions. So the size of hamburgers in the US since the 1950s has tripled 3 times. So you used to have to order a hamburger, eat it. If you wanted another one, get up and get it, eat it. If you wanted another one, get up again and eat it. Now you just buy once. And it's no wonder that this has had a tremendous impact on people's BMI, their weight in the US. So, when I started this talk, if I had asked you, what do people have to do to form a habit? I'm guessing you would have said something about willpower. And if I'd asked you about changing a habit, I bet you would have said something about willpower too. And in a funny way, you're right, although not in the way you think. Because research has shown in the past couple of years that people who have really good willpower understand environmental friction. They form good habits. So these are the students who study at the library, not in their dorm room where there's lots of craziness going on. These are people who go and eat at a salad bar instead of thinking that they can go to a fast food restaurant and just order salad. These are people who figure out they can't go to a birthday party hungry because they'll eat all of the dessert. They choose situations that are helpful to them in meeting their goals. And they are then able to act on their goals without stress, without actually exerting willpower. They automate beneficial behaviors into habit. And that's what we've learned about people who have good self-control. is they understand automaticity. But now so do you guys, right? I told you there'd be a quiz. So what are the 3 important components of forming a habit? Anyone? Repetition, yay, okay. Sorry? Running? Fun, a reward. You have to like what you're doing, exactly, so that you get that dopamine response. And so you keep repeating the behavior. Yes. And the third one? Sorry? Trigger, a cue, and it has to be something that makes the behavior easy. So there's not much friction there. The cue has to be something that makes it easy for you to repeat the behavior. Okay, you're all habit experts. How about changing a habit? Same, yes, adding friction. Adding friction is what changes a habit. And if you don't pay attention to the impact of environmental cues, you end up in some really ridiculous situations, like this one, where you're kind of doing the right thing, but only sort of. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much for being a great audience.